Our next unit of study is going to be the progressive era. So, topic number 6 for your final exam. Progressive era, here's what you got to know about it in terms of vocabulary. First off, what is a progressive as defined at this time? It's someone who wanted to use the power of government to fix the problems in American society. So, by the time we get the progressive era, it's after the Gilded Age. You have gross wealth inequality. You have the food being spoiled. You have women deprived of their rights. You have drunks in the street. You have terrible living conditions. The problems of America go on and on and on and on and on in the early 1900s. Progressives want to use the power of government to fix some of these problems because they think government can get more involved and thus can solve the problems. One of the ways that they would make these problems come to light is through some muckrakers. Muckrakers are journalists who uncover abuses and or corruption in big business or government. So muckrakers are going to be your investigative journalists who are going to try and educate everybody as to what's really going on. So the idea is you call people on the newspaper. It's bad press, right? It's letting people know, hey, did you know J.D. Rockefeller is buying senators' votes? Hey, did you know that Andrew Carnegie doesn't pay his workers a living wage? By putting it out there in the newspapers, it creates this public pressure on you to change and improve your behavior. Even if you don't mean it, you feel the pressure to do it. And so even if you just pay a lip service, you do change a little bit. And so muckrakers are really able to help, one, educate society as to how bad things are, and two, create some movement to fixing it and changing it. Referendums are an example of a progressive era win. This is the practice of allowing voters to decide yes or no on a proposed law. So we have referendums in Massachusetts every couple of years. The idea is that this referendum is just, hey, should MCAS be a graduation requirement? Let's ask the people. So instead of the state legislature making the call, the people get to have their say. So they vote it up or they vote it down. So that's what referendums are. It's a way of giving power back to the people and not necessarily to the state legislatures. Samuel Gompers is going to be the first president of the American Federation of Labor, one of the more powerful labor unions at this time. And again, he's going to advocate for fair working conditions, improved fair pay, improved working conditions for workers as part of the American Federation of Labor. Industrial union, these are the groups of workers that work together advocating for better pay. They typically work in the same industry. So, like teachers' unions, for example, police unions, the Teamsters, they typically work in the same industry. You wouldn't typically have a teacher and a plumber in the same union, right? There'd be a plumber's union, there'd be a teacher's union. So that's what we're talking about. These groups of workers working together to improve wages and working conditions. Theodore Roosevelt is going to be a Republican president, a progressive Republican president, who's going to increase federal government regulation of big business. He's going to take a lot of these progressive reforms. Theodore Roosevelt views the role of the government as to be the referee. And so when he sees things that are unfair, he's going to get involved and he's going to work to improve it. We saw it previously with Upton Sinclair and that letter that was written to Theodore Roosevelt from Upton Sinclair about the meatpacking industry, and then lo and behold, change happens shortly thereafter. We also saw that photograph of people living in the tenement. That photo was taken by Jacob Riis. He is a bit of a muckraker, right? He's taking pictures of how terrible the living conditions are for some people living in New York City, and he's exposing how terrible those conditions are through his book, How the Other Half Lives. So Jacob Riis, in that sense, is a muckraker. He takes photographs of how bad the things are, and then he shows everybody how bad the things are in an effort to get people to do something about it. Alice Paul is going to be the National Women's Party. She's going to be way more confrontational than women like Carrie Chapman Catt. Carrie Chapman Catt wanted women's right to vote as much as Alice Paul did, but Carrie Chapman Catt should hold protests, should go on parades. Alice Paul would be far more vocal about it. She would push the issue. Um, Alice Paul would be the one who, not saying violence would be used, but she was far more aggressive in her demanding of women's suffrage. And so, picketing the White House, for example, instead of supporting Wilson, she went after him. And it's an example of how you have multiple ways that women are approaching their demand for suffrage, for the right to vote. Upton Sinclair is the author of The Jungle. That is the meatpacking story about how terrible the conditions are in those Chicago meatpacking factories. If we take a look at this political cartoon here, we can see what's happening. So the context. Okay, the context for this primary source. It is the progressive era. There are problems in American society, problems that the government is going to try and fix, that the progressives in government are going to try and get government to fix. What do we see? What's the summary here? Well, this guy is clearly Theodore Roosevelt. From the glasses to the hat to the mustache, the guy's clearly Roosevelt. And he's got a big rake looking, says investigation. And underneath it, you can see meat scandal with the bones of all these creatures. Ooh. So, the summary here is that Theodore Roosevelt's going to do some kind of investigation to the meat packing industry and really figure out, okay, what's going on there. The perspective. Clearly, the author of this cartoon views Theodore Roosevelt positively because he's showing him investigating the meat scandal. Clearly, the author views this meat scandal as something gross and disgusting, the way you see the smoke and stink coming off it and all the bones. So, this is probably created by a more progressive political cartoonist who wants to show Theodore Roosevelt as taking action to resolve this meat scandal, for lack of a better term. Big picture question. Many progressive era laws were passed to fix problems plaguing America at the time. Provide two examples of events that happened and the laws that were passed to fix it. So, when we talk about this question, basically tell me two problems and tell me how it was fixed. So, for example, if we talk about the meatpacking industry, right, the meat scandal, the how terrible those conditions were for food being produced, one of the laws that was passed was the Meatpacking Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act. These laws passed in 1905 required standards of care and cleanliness for where the food was purchased and processed. So it ensured that your food would be what it says it is, right? What it says on the label. First off, having a label, but number two, it is what it says it is, and that you can be sure that it was created in a reasonably clean facility. So that's number one. So you can talk about the problem would be the meatpacking industry and how gross it was. A solution would be the Pure Food and Drug Act or the Meatpacking Act, Meat Inspection Act. Both of those would work. Another problem you could say, how about public drunkenness, right? How about the abuse of alcohol? That could be a problem that America is facing. An example to fix that would be prohibition, a constitutional amendment that does not allow the selling, the manufacture, or the production of alcohol. So that would be another one. How about, let's talk about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, right? That tragedy, that fire that killed dozens of women who were working there. What happens as a result? Safety laws are put into place to protect workers so that the fire escape needs to be accessible. You can't lock the doors on the workers that are there. Those types of things. How about Jacob Riis publishing How the Other Half Lives, showing people how bad the tenements are, and then you have New York City passing laws that prohibit the tenements, right? The Anti-Tenement Act. So you've got these things here where you're actively seeing, hey, here's a problem. Here's the law to fix it, right? They kind of go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Public drunkenness, fix it with prohibition. Disgusting meat, feed it with the Pure Food and Drug Act. Women getting killed in factories, pass the safety, raise the safety standards for factories. And then number two, how do progressives take political power away from businesses and political party bosses and give it back to the people? Give three specific examples. What progressives are trying to do is give power back to the people, and they do it in a couple different ways. Number one is with referendums. Referendums are allowing people to vote up or down on a particular item. So, should MCAS be a graduation requirement? That was a referendum. The people voted. It wasn't a party boss. It wasn't the politicians in town. It was the people of Massachusetts voted whether or not MCAS should be a graduation requirement. The power went to the people. A second example of how progressives gave power back to the people would be the direct election of senators. Previously, senators were elected by the state legislatures. So you didn't vote for the senator, but the representatives in Boston did. Now, the direct election of senators, that amendment is going to allow you and me and every other voter to vote on our senator instead of the state government. So you're kind of cutting out the state government from exercising that federal control, that federal power. So now senators don't have to be loyal to the state government. They have to be loyal to the people of that state because now the people of the state determine whether or not they get in or out of office. In terms of other examples of how do they give power back to the people, how about the recall? This was a time where the recall is put into place where politicians can be pulled out of office. So there's impeachment if you really screw up, But if the people don't like you, it used to be you didn't have a choice. Now you can have a recall petition, which is if you are in office but are doing a terrible job, the people can recall you and force you out in an election. So they can force you out and get your replacement. So that would be another example of political power we can give back to the people. So the whole idea about this progressive era is just giving more power to the people in a way that it hadn't been previously for the past 40 years at this point. Is really what it comes down to. And that is the progressive era in a nutshell.